Awesome. So thanks so much for having me. Super excited to share with you about my experience, how to use LinkedIn, and my viewpoint as a hiring manager. Personally, I've had a really, blessed journey as being in the workforce, and so happy to give back to the community, and especially during these unprecedented times. Certainly happy to, lift up any community members, as little as possible. So, with that said, here's the agenda that I'm going to talk through today. So, going to do a little introduction, brief about myself and my journey. And then we're going to focus on LinkedIn in particular. So worked there for a few years, really focused on the profile. So doing data science for the profile. And, I'm happy to share some of the tips and tricks with getting to become discoverable at LinkedIn. And then I'd like to share what I look for as a hiring manager. So I think there's a lot of strategies that can be easily overcome. And, happy to share what I think those are. And then finally, would leave time for questions and answers. Okay, great. So going forward, so a bit about myself. So I've been in the data science and analytics field since '06. So wow, a little over 14 years now. Within that period of time, have 8 patents, 2 of which are actually for the LinkedIn profile. And so, they have to do with search engine optimization and the algorithms that go into that. And so happy to share more about that if you're interested. With respect to my journey, I actually got my undergraduate degree at UCSD in religious studies. And so my original intent was to do missions overseas and to do God's work. Obviously, God had different plans for me. So I am where I am. And I actually was working at Best Buy when I entered the grad program at Point Loma. And so I was part of the Geek Squad and was wearing the tie and everything in Best Buy. And, when I started the program at Point Loma, my goal was really to, one, find a faith-based program, because to continue that growth, not only academically, but also within the faith and trying to pursue that kind of missionary type work. And then, 2, was just really trying to advance my career in any way possible. And so, one thing led to another, got an internship, and now I'm actually a group manager of product managers here at Apple. So specifically within Apple, I am part of the Apple Media Products. So Apple Media Products is the services arm of Apple. So if you think App Store, Music, iTunes, all those internet-based services, we're kind of like the small internet company within Apple. And so from my perspective, I'm always on the lookout for product managers. And so in this case, a product manager really has a couple of key attributes that I look for. So one is this, what I call product sense. So if you think about products that you use on a regular basis, so for example, we're going to talk about LinkedIn, it's really understanding, okay, what is this experience like? As a job seeker, what does that experience look like for me? Is it easy for me to navigate? Or what are some things to make it easy to navigate? So that's, to me, what product sense really is. I think secondly, it's really about how do we organize and structure our communication. So as a product manager, you're really responsible for trying to understand, okay, if I have this feature that I'm trying to put forward to an engineering team, to executives that I'm trying to pitch, then you really need to have that structured communication and that discipline around what does that look like to prepare that and present that. And then finally, what I think is really important about product managers is just really getting stuff done. So what's fascinating about product management is you do a little bit of tech, you do a little bit of business, and then you incorporate some analytics, and then finally you kind of have to sell this vision. And so, you can't really just delegate 100%, you need to step in where you can. And so really getting this balance of just getting stuff done is important. And so I unfortunately recently filled all my recs, but happy to keep in touch should I get more recs and looking to fill more roles. So I've included my email here as well as a link to my LinkedIn profile. And so happy to connect with all of you. All right, so that being said, let's focus on LinkedIn. So when I think about optimizing for LinkedIn, there's really 2 big components that I think are really important. So the first is you have to think about LinkedIn from an SEO perspective. So SEO, for those who are unfamiliar, it's search engine optimization. And so you have to think about a crawler that crawls through all the profiles and then finds keywords that are important for when people search. So for example, if somebody were to search Apple, because I currently work at Apple, my profile should come up because I have the company Apple. So, that's just kind of the basics of SEO. But some of the key components there are that we're going to talk about are, what does it look like to have a complete profile, and what does it look like to have a fresh profile? The second key aspect of optimizing your profile is really activity and content. So one of the best ways to become discoverable is really to just be engaged in the profile, in the community, right? Whether that be liking something, posting something, sharing an article, doing something. So we'll find that that's really critical to helping drive that SEO. And so aside from that piece, which is really centered around optimization of what you can put out there, the second key piece is really around, well, how can you take advantage of LinkedIn as a community? And what we'll find is, there's a way to organize the content that's coming up, so you can easily, identify things that are happening in real time. And then secondly, the LinkedIn community, the people that work at LinkedIn are actually highly invested in making it successful and working with job seekers and working with people. So, that's another key component that we can take advantage of the tool. So we'll dive into each of these areas a little bit deeper in the next coming slides. All right, so optimizing your profile. So here's an example of my profile on the right. Fun fact, that banner is a picture I took in Korea, in Gangnam. Really fascinating library, it's really pretty. Okay, cool. So, hey now, you're an all-star. And what's nice about LinkedIn is they have this profile helper to really help you get to the level of detail and level of content that's necessary to even reach the bare minimum for SEO, right? So as an example here, if you're missing something, let's say a summary, it'll walk you through what's missing and what's needed. And going back to, my experience at LinkedIn and the patents that I have around LinkedIn, you have to keep in mind that LinkedIn optimizes all of the profiles for name searches in Google or name searches in Bing. So whenever I type, Warren Bartolome on Google, me as LinkedIn, I'm trying to optimize for my profile to be at the top. And so that's why each of these things that is asking to be filled in LinkedIn is being set to optimize for that capability, right? Now, it's really up to you. Like that option, it's called a public facing profile. You don't actually have to have that. So if you're uncomfortable with that or you feel like that's unnecessary, then you can certainly control and limit how you're viewed externally. Personally, as a job seeker, to me, I think this is one way that can help really just get discovered, right? And so I recommend finding that balance for yourself and which way you're comfortable. But this is just one way to help optimize that. And so so this is exactly what I was going to do. So on the right, if you can recall, my profile looked a little bit different from what it looked like internally to externally. So as I search for myself on LinkedIn, you'll see that, okay, this is how it would be presented to somebody who, let's say, searching on Google or Bing, right? You'll see that, okay, the top is a little bit different. It's really focused about who I am and kind of, what I'm about, and maybe some articles engagement. And so you'll start to notice that, okay, the third piece here at the bottom, below the about, that's where you really start to capture the activity, right? And similar to how the Google algorithms work, they really focus on fresh content. And so you're starting to see why it's important to start thinking about, okay, am I always updating or adding fresh content so that way it starts to rank versus just having a stale profile. And so there are some small things that you can do when it comes to, profile freshness, fresh content, right? And so here on the right, I have an example of just like the summary of of who you are, right? This is why you see people have oh, data infrastructure / Facebook / Netflix / Goldman Sachs. It's because they're optimizing for like the Google searches. They're optimizing for the LinkedIn searches. Personally, you know, sure, you could do it. It works. Does it aesthetically look the best? It's up for discussion, right? But you can see now that people are really optimizing for that capability. But also, as you update this, it's adding quote unquote fresh content, right? And so even if you didn't want to make dramatic changes, let's say you didn't want to make dramatic changes to your experience or your, you know, some of the descriptions in some of your past experience, this can be something small that you can just adjust to help, you know, improve your SEO. Likewise, when it comes to more depth in your profile, you know, you can share articles, you can add keywords in your articles that really help improve this search. So going back to the patents that I help file at LinkedIn, a lot of it has to do with the skills that you're listing on your LinkedIn profile. So I know it's kind of a pain, I know it's kind of clunky at the moment, but you'll notice that in the skills section of your profile, there's a lot of autofill for a lot of the common skill sets that are out there in the workforce. And, you know, while it might seem cumbersome at the moment, what we found is when you add this, when you get endorsements, when you have recommendations around these skills, it really helps improve and it helps affect the search algorithm in positive ways. So these are just additional ways I would consider how to either keep your profile fresh, so that way you have recent updates, so you have fresh content, as well as more content to search through. Cool, so let me pause there. So just a quick recap. So one, we want to make sure that we have a complete profile, we have all of the fields filled out, we're really optimizing for search engine optimization, and really the goal there is to have content that can be discovered either through public-facing SEO and internal to LinkedIn, right? And again, just to recap, that level of external versus internal is totally up to your personal preference and something you can control within LinkedIn, so feel free to do that. The second piece, again, just to recap, is the freshness of the profile. So it's not like a one and done deal where, okay, I'll set up my profile and then I'm done. No, you set up your profile and then maybe, let's say 30 days later, you know, make a small update, just keep the profile fresh. And, you know, it could be everything from maybe adjusting your summary to, you know, adding content, sharing content, or then even adjusting and adding skills, right? So those are the two big buckets for the profile and really focusing on SEO. Now, the next piece about LinkedIn is really using LinkedIn to your advantage. And so here on the right, I have a screenshot of a LinkedIn employee, and this was, you know, pretty recently. And you'll notice that they are giving away LinkedIn Premium subscriptions. So something to keep in mind, I'll get back to this in a moment, but the LinkedIn community, the LinkedIn company, and people who work at LinkedIn are always actively engaging in the community. So definitely take advantage of that. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to highlight with LinkedIn and as a way to really help you grow or help you take advantage of LinkedIn are the hashtags. So hashtags are relatively new to LinkedIn. And so what's nice about the way it's structured at LinkedIn is that the URL is formatted in a very intuitive way. So you'll notice on the right here, I have it set up as linkedin.com/feed/hashtag/ in this case, it's hiring, right? And so you'll notice that there's 2 million people following this hashtag. But then when you go here, you'll notice that all of the posts that come up because of this hashtag would be related to hiring, right? So as an active job seeker, it helps me organize the posts. It helps me view things that are beyond my network. And when it comes to recruiters and hiring managers that are actively hiring, it's a great way to just see, you know, what's going on and maybe who the recruiters are because they're posting activity as well. So for me, I think this is a good way to find opportunities. Now, in contrast, as a hiring manager, this is exactly where I was going for looking for candidates. So one example is because of the unfortunate circumstances surrounding COVID, a lot of people were affected. And so one of the things I did was, okay, well, I was looking at the hashtag COVID to see if I could find product managers that were affected and might be in the, looking for new opportunities. And so for me, and in the contrast, like I was using this to find candidates. So, if you want to advertise yourself, if you want to add hashtags to your posts and content, this is a good way to get noticed as well. And so the next piece about LinkedIn is not only organizing the content, taking advantage of the groups and the hashtags there, but it's really to take advantage of the LinkedIn community. So the one thing I love about LinkedIn is that their culture is amazing. So their culture is all about next play, it's all about transforming your career, and they live it, they breathe it. They have an alumni network, and so they really want to take advantage of how do you help people, find opportunity, grow opportunity. And what's fascinating is going through the interview process at LinkedIn, they'll tell you, hey, when you think about people in countries that are participating in LinkedIn and they're finding opportunity and they're getting these new opportunities for themselves, the vision behind LinkedIn is to really raise GDPs. And it's fascinating because when you think about it, you're like, holy cow, that's actually true. And then when you see it, you're like, holy cow, this is amazing. And so, the employees are all trying to help, fill that vision, fulfill that vision and see it. And so one perfect way to do that is just to reach out to employees, right? You could reach out to the recruiters, you could reach out to, people like this who's giving away free subscriptions. And so totally take advantage of that. I think this is kind of one of those small things where, if I was on the job hunt or if I was new to the workforce and I either wanted advice or I just wanted to connect with folks, this is definitely one of those small things that I would not have normally thought of to help me, either understand the community, understand the marketplace, but this is definitely one of those tricks that I would take advantage of. Okay, and then lastly, so we covered content, we covered SEO, we covered taking advantage of the platform itself and how to organize content and how to, find the people that are part of the LinkedIn community who might be giving away stuff. And then lastly, it's again, just going back to becoming active, right? So just simple things like putting articles out there, reaching out to people, putting content together and putting activity on your profile. It's all these really small things that add up to being discoverable, right? And so when I was first starting out my career at Best Buy and LinkedIn was coming out and, there was a bunch of people on LinkedIn, one of the places I really wanted to work at was Sony. And I realized, I wanted to be part of the video game industry. I wanted to work on video games. And within San Diego, so Sony Online is down there. Now they're called Daybreak Games. Also SEDA is down there and Rockstar is down there. So anyway, when I first started LinkedIn, I was like, oh, let me find some people that are Sony. And what you'll find is that the people on LinkedIn are pretty responsive and they're pretty open to just grabbing a cup of coffee. And so I reached out to this marketing manager. I reached out to this one guy who's like a manager. And I just said, hey, would you be open to just catching up and would love to learn more about you and your position. And they were totally open to it. And so, unrelated to that, I was also perusing like jobs and applications within Sony. And, one thing led to another, and I actually got the internship and ultimately a full-time position at Sony Online. And so I worked on EverQuest, I worked on Star Wars Galaxies, I worked on Free Roam. And, that's not to say that this led to that, but it certainly helped encourage me to get on the right path to get prepared for that position. So, totally worth reaching out to folks. And then if you get that free subscription from a LinkedIn member, you kind of had unlimited reaching out to folks unless for the premium subscription. Otherwise, you just have like a limited number of credits. So that's the only other thing. Okay, so that is the LinkedIn piece. now, shifting gears a little bit, I'm going to share about now what I look for as a hiring manager. And when I look back on my career as a leader within the company, I've been a manager now for like 3 years, and I've filled probably 20 some odd positions, and I've conducted probably hundreds of phone interviews. And it's interesting because when I think about my early career and when I was interviewing, it's fascinating to see and think about and reflect on how I was interviewing as an early career candidate to where I'm at now. And so would love to share how I think about that for you as you think about how you want to prepare for these conversations, as you prepare for these discussions to put your best foot forward. And so the way I look at it is there's two big buckets, right? So the first big bucket are, okay, when I'm scanning through profiles, I love to look for just self-learning, side projects, right? So like for me, because I majored in religious studies, I did not have a background in computer science. I did not have a background in databases. I did not have a background in data. And as I got my internship, I'm like, I need to fix that. So I had side projects in standing up databases. I was, putting together code on the side to learn about this stuff. And to me, the way I see it is if you are, doing something like, normal positions, normal work, and then you have a side project, you're going above and beyond, and you're showing that enthusiasm that really demonstrates, okay, you're really serious about this area. It doesn't matter what you did in an undergrad. It just shows me now that you're really pursuing it seriously. And this leads me to that next point, which is, I think one of the key things that I value is this potential. It's the way I would summarize the potential is kind of grit. And so we'll get a little bit more into that later on in the next slides. But just keep that in mind. We can get to that in a moment. But think about grit and Angela Duckworth. We'll talk about that in a second. And then the second big bucket I look for is really around when it comes to those discussions, right? What are some of the key things that I look for? So personally, I think the first and foremost thing is clear and concise communication. Happy to share more about that in a moment. But basically, it boils down to, don't tell me a life story. Like I ask a question, take a moment, pause, think about it, and then answer the question. And then finally, that leads to like my latter point or my last point, which is really organized thought and command of the material. So when you take a moment, organize your thoughts, and then really explain that back to me in a structured fashion, it really demonstrates that you do have that command of material or even command of that thought process. So we'll get into that a little bit more. Okay, so visual cues. So I was just poking around LinkedIn, and then here's a kind of an example of stuff, of some stuff that I found that's really interesting. So you can see that this person was doing data science, they were a TA, and then they shared kind of some coursework here. So I was like, oh, that's cool. So it really comes through in the profile. Versus, let's say, somebody who maybe would just put their positions and then that's it, right? All right, cool. So side projects. So for me as a hiring manager, I have to parse through hundreds of resumes. Now, what's fascinating for me is, when you go through resumes, you're like, okay, yeah, this person, probably has the experience. Okay, that looks good. But, you get into this rhythm of, oh, okay, that's probably status quo, status quo, status quo, phone screen, phone screen, phone screen. But then what really jumps out is when somebody has a side project, like, it could be volunteering. It could be, doing leadership in something else. It could be in the computer science sense, it's really about like maybe a side app or like a, in this case, like a human or robot detection, competition. And so having that extra level of, yes, I am taking this extra step to do this, to show that I'm passionate about this, to me, that jumps out. I'm like, great, let's prioritize this person on the stack, right? And the benefit of having a side project is when it comes to the interview process, you have added content with which you can discuss things about, right? And so let me give you an example. When I was starting my career out, when I was working at Best Buy, I was just throwing my resume out there to a bunch of places. And I got this call back from a accounting firm that was looking for a software person for their like checks and Quicken software, basically. And the person was asking me, oh, hey, do you have any experience using Quicken software? And my response at the time was, no, right? And there have been so many instances where I would be happy to give like undergraduates, graduates a chance to interview because they have that, oomph to reach out, or they have that desire to talk about it. But then when I ask them the same question, have you, ever done this, blah, 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 they're like, no, Now, if you have a side project, sure, it might not be like an officially sanctioned company, but if you have a side project, it's still something you can talk about, right? So if I were to reflect back on that experience where the accounting firm was trying to recruit me, and I had a side project in, let's say, trying to stand up this open sourced accounting software, I could say something instead of saying no, I could say, oh, well, no, but you know what? I tried exploring this software. And the reason I think this is much better than Great Plains software is because of blah, 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 right? And so not only is it something that I can talk about and share with, but it gives me that confidence and it shows that I can demonstrate that knowledge about the area with which they're interested in, right? So to me, the beauty of side projects is exactly that. And the second piece of that goes back to that enthusiasm potential. So this is a really interesting area as a hiring manager in a couple of ways. So I think first and foremost, the hiring competition within Silicon Valley is incredibly steep. Like there's just so much competition with Silicon Valley. Like there are people from Ivy League, there are people with 10, 20 years of experience, there are people who have created a startup and sold it for millions of dollars, right? And so it's like, how on earth do you compete for that? How do you compete with that, right? And so one of the things for me as a hiring manager that I've really focused on is how do you parse out all of that stuff? And how do you parse out for somebody that has this potential, right? So this kind of goes back to my own personal experience, which is I was doing tech work in Geek Squad in 2013, right? And now I'm leading a team of product management at Apple, right? I did my undergraduate degree in religious studies, but I'm rubbing elbows with like people that have doctorate degrees in computer science. It's a fascinating journey. It's, I'm incredibly, it's not lost on me that I'm incredibly blessed to be able to do this, but it takes a lot of hustle. You know what I mean? And so it's fascinating to try and parse this out as a hiring manager. And the way that I could see that is really through, these discussions. It's like, are you excited about it? Are you doing side projects about it? Are you, reading material and filling yourself with all this material so that way you can talk about it? And when I look at it, if you gave me the opportunity between somebody who is junior and maybe has 1 or 2 years experience or even no experience, but has this enthusiasm, has this level of, I want to do that, versus somebody who has 5 years of experience, right? And might have been doing this for a couple of years. And they're like, yeah, I know how to do this. I have my own ways. Hands down, I would pick the enthusiastic person, 100%. Because then they'll come in, they'll have the energy, they'll have the gusto, they'll have the passion to not only take it to the next level and to grow, but also to take the team along with them, right? Because that energy, that passion becomes contagious. So I think it's really important to figure that out as a candidate to really find that area that gets you super stoked, right? Cool. So side projects, getting more content, learning how to talk about it, showing your enthusiasm, and then 2, really showing that enthusiasm and then leveraging that to demonstrate, okay, I have this passion for this area, and I want that to come through as a candidate. Okay, so let's say, great, went through your stuff, And now I'm like, let's have a conversation. Let's learn more about yourself. And this is really where, for me as a hiring manager, it's important to come through. And so the first area is clear and concise communication. Now, on the right, I have a picture of the SpaceX Dragon capsule, control console. And not only is it timely because of just amazing things that have happened recently, but the fact that it's so clean and it's so intuitive, it looks amazing, right? And you compare this with, let's say, like the old Apollo control switches, which is like a bunch of switches and it looks like it's just overwhelming. And so, to me, it just visually describes the kind of concise and clear communication that I look for as a hiring manager. And so the way that I would encompass it is, so firstly, if you are able to provide the appropriate level of context, then that's fine. Like, it just has to be the minimum amount of context. There have been so many times where I've had candidates. So personally, as a hiring manager, for example, I like to hire a lot of behavioral questions. So for example, what is some work that you've done that you're particularly proud of, right? And so in that question, it's like a project or work that you're proud of, and tell me about it. Like, just, 2 things. And there have been so many times where somebody will come back and they'll say, well, I have 5 projects that I'm really proud of. Let me tell you about all 5. Like, no, dude, like that's fine. Like, I'm glad you're enthusiastic about it, but we have 30 minutes and you can't go through all 5, right? And so in that case, 1 is good, but then more importantly, let's say you do have 5, right? Then it's worth saying, okay, well, you know what? I have 5 projects that I'm interested in sharing with you. 2 of them are probably more geared towards technology, and then 3 of them are geared towards more product, right? Which one are you most interested in hearing about? So asking these clarifying questions and just challenging me in the sense that, you're interpreting, you're understanding the question, you want to get more clarity, is a great way of getting me engaged as a hiring manager, right? And so, let's say we go through this exercise, and once you're done with that, personally, what I like to do is I like to just pause and ask the question back as a candidate to be like, hey, here's my answer to that question. Does this answer your question, right? Not only does it say, okay, hey, I want to make sure I'm answering everything that you've asked me, but 2, it adds a nice kind of wrap around the conversation to be like, I think we're concluding this, let's move on to the next point. So you're helping move along the conversation as well as a candidate. So definitely like to follow up with that. And then, kind of going back to my example before, it's really more about the proactive nature of being a candidate, right? There have been so many instances where I've screened candidates who I think have potential. And I'm like, hey, I'm looking for product managers with this area. What do you think about this space, the big data space? Let's talk about the big data space. And so a lot of these candidates will be like, yeah, I don't have experience in the big data space, but I can learn, right? And so to me, like, as a candidate, this is something that I've done before as well, right? And I'm like, I could tell people that I'm super excited and I want to learn this and I can learn this, right? And as a hiring manager, I can't hold that against them. And rather, what I would much rather see instead, and when I reflect on my own experience, what I'd much rather do or what I've learned is not to say, I can learn this, but then it goes back to the side projects, the learning myself. So instead of saying, hey, you know what, let's talk about big data. Do you have any experience here? No, but you know what? My side project, I put in Amazon Web Services. And when I put in Amazon Web Services, here's what I learned, right? I did EC2 instances and I put all my data in S3. And so, now it becomes not that I can learn it, but the fact that I've already been proactive and I have learned it, or I've learned something about it, right? So you really want to have that more proactive nature when you're communicating versus more the reactive nature of, okay, I can learn it. And so, that's kind of like the preliminary things I look for, right? So just trying to understand clear and concise thought, and trying to really understand, show that proactive nature. But then even when you're going into all of that, it shouldn't just be like a blurb of words, right? Don't just like tell me your life story. Like, you know, I love data ever since I was like in kindergarten when I was working with like these databases and blah, 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 you know, so you should really take a moment. And I have so much respect for these candidates who are like, oh, okay, well, you know, can you give me a moment? Let me organize my thoughts and then jot it down, right? Absolutely. Like if you have a hiring manager that says, no, you cannot have that time, I wouldn't want to work for them anyway, right? So pause, take a moment, write it down, think about what you're going to say, and then be like, okay, well, here's how I think, you know, I can answer this question, right? Now, in my line of work, we have to work with very amorphous and you know, non-structured problems. And I think you'll find similar type questions, similar type work in any industry, really. And so what I would challenge you to do as a candidate is to really offer a framework of how you're thinking about things, right? So for example, in a lot of these business cases, like a lot of business majors or a lot of business style positions, you'll have to think about, well, how am I going to be successful in this role? How am I going to be successful in this area, right? As an account executive, how do I find myself successful? And so, you know, one way to answer that is, well, here's a framework that I think is really important. Let's say as an account executive, right? As an account executive, I want to make sure I have a healthy funnel, right? I have a healthy amount of leads that are coming in. I'm converting these leads into connections, and then finally conversions into sales, right? And so, you know, really structuring that thought into, okay, this is how I'm going to tackle this problem will be key in, I think, getting through in a lot of these conversations, right? So not only does it show that you're organizing your thoughts, but it shows that you're really giving this a lot of thought in how to tackle to the end result, right? So I would definitely challenge you as candidates to really think about what that framework looks like with respect to any, you know, role that you're trying to get after. And then what's important for me is that a candidate asks questions, right? Let me give you some softball ones so that we could use them in the future. Like one of my favorites is, hey, you know, you worked at this place. What surprised you about this place, right? Every time I've asked that, people are like, oh, that's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. So I expect like 30 or some odd new people to say, what surprised you about working there? But, you know, it not only shows that the candidate is enthusiastic and interested about the working at this place, but it shows that they're engaged in the process, right? Like, sure, it's not fun. It's not fun to try and do an interview, and like I cannot describe the amount of times where I've had a candidate who's just like unenthusiastic. They're like answering questions. They sound so bored, and then they don't ask any questions, and I'm like, oh man, that's such a bummer. So please ask questions, because you know, it's very much a two-way street where, you know, I'm interviewing you for my team. I want to make sure you're a good fit for my team. But on the same token, you know, do you want to work with me? It doesn't always have to be yes. I could be a terrible boss. You never know, right? So make sure you ask those questions. Cool. So those are the two big topics. And so happy to open up to Q&A.
Thanks, Warren. Yeah, we have a few Q&A questions that popped into the chat. So we're going to start with those and then we'll go from there.
Sure.
This is a lot earlier on. Karen asked if the PowerPoint would be available for a download. Are you okay with us sharing this PowerPoint with participants afterwards? Okay, awesome.
Totally.
We will make sure that that gets emailed to the people who are here in this presentation. Myra asks a great question. Does LinkedIn Premium affect SEO?
Oh, good question. No. So LinkedIn Premium is really only for viewing search results and performing searches, and then also being able to reach out to folks that are beyond your third degree. So normally, if somebody's outside of your third degree network, then you can use credits to reach out to them. But with Premium, you kind of have unlimited for that duration of Premium. So those are generally the big things. And the little gold badge on your profile, but that's it.
Michael asked, where is the line in differentiating like when we're talking about active profiles, what is the line between active and too active to the point where maybe it's weird?
Good question. My rule of thumb is 30 days, roughly. So when you think about what's happening behind the scenes, like something is parsing your profile, it's then registering it and then offering it up to like, you know, the SEO engines. And so I think Google, the rule of thumb for Google is like 60 days. So, you know, personally, I wouldn't go beyond 30 days.
Awesome. And then we have a couple of Michaels on here. So another Michael asks, how can I message and grab the attention of a hiring manager recruiter on LinkedIn? Simply writing a formal message has not worked for me. And so just some tips on how we can get them to respond.
Good question. Yeah. So I think two things. So I think firstly, in LinkedIn jobs, they should highlight who the recruiter is. So one of the ways is to ping that recruiter actively, and they're highly vested in trying to fill the rec, so they should be responsive. But if not, then I think any hiring manager that says I'm hiring on LinkedIn or is a manager, let's say at some big companies are probably hiring, they can make recommendations. Now to get their attention, that is a good question. Let's see. So I think for me, it's a couple of things. So personally, I want to respond to everybody that reaches out. You know, whether it's just connecting or, you know, whether it's something I could help you out with, like I'm happy to do what I can. Now, if I don't respond, it's probably because I got, you know, I'm doing something, I was going to do something for you, and then something caught my attention and I got distracted and then I forgot about it, right? So I think the first thing, is to just follow up and be like, oh, hey, you know, I reached out and wanted to get your thoughts on this, right? I think the other thing that can really grab attention is if you like have specific content or specific relevant like topics on mind relative to the position. So like I'll be honest with you, I get messages from people that are like, hey, you know, I'm interested in this position, and that's it. It's like, okay, great, sure, happy to help, you know, do what I can. But it's kind of like, at that point, it's like, they're not trying to really think about what's in the message. Now, in contrast, if you have something that's more specific to be like, hey, you know, Warren, I've worked on this technology and I bet, you know, you don't use this, or I bet, you know, you could use this for help, right? Now, to me, that'd be like, oh, okay, this is totally different. It's, you know, it's framed in a way that benefits me because you're like, you know, offering a solution to something that I probably don't have already. But at the same time, it's different than, you know, please help me. You know what I mean? So I would kind of tackle it that way. But this also brings up and reminds me of a point I forgot to bring up earlier in the discussion, which is Google HR, Google recruiters did a study. So this is the New York Times. Happy to share this article. And they did a study of ways to get hired, right? And honestly, the results that they found are getting hired is really a numbers game. So, you know, if you ever worked in sales, or if you've ever, you know, just worked in an environment where you're just like, you know, blasting out emails and just sending stuff out and then, you know, getting like a 1% response rate, I think it's very much the same thing in getting hired in the workforce. So, you know, part of that is try not to be discouraged, try to persevere. I know it's difficult, but yeah, it's definitely a numbers game. And, you know, just following up, throwing stuff out there is definitely a way to be successful. So, yeah.
Awesome. And then we'll make sure that article gets sent out with the presentation as well, so that you guys can take a look at that. Here's another question. How do you earn the ability to post live on LinkedIn?
Post live. I'm not sure. Is this like, just to clarify the question, is this like to do like live video, or?
I believe that's what he's.
I'm not quite.
Yeah, I believe that's what he's asking, like live videos. Adam, I don't know if you want to clarify that. Yes, he says live video.
Gotcha. That's a good question. I actually don't know the answer to that, unfortunately. But going back to the presentation, I'd find somebody on LinkedIn, like somebody who works at LinkedIn. And if you don't, like if for whatever reason you don't have that capability, then you should absolutely reach out. Live video was actually a feature that we rolled out when I was there back in 2016, 2017. And so I'm actually surprised that it's not a regular feature that's available. So yeah, if you don't have it, then it must be either they rolled it back or yeah, they might be holding it back, but I'm surprised it's not open to everybody. But happy to follow up if you don't get an answer.
Cool, and I'll make sure, I know, Warren, that you shared your email at the beginning, but I'll make sure to put that in the chat box too, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Couple more questions we have. One is, what is a good way to find LinkedIn keywords for SEO that pertain to my career specifically?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way I would do it personally is I would search for the position or your position on LinkedIn and then just see what are the top profiles that come up, right? And click those profiles and then go through those profiles and see how relevant those profiles are to what your experience is and try to mimic some of what those descriptions are, what some of those skill sets are to your profile. So, yeah.
Okay, we have one more question, it looks like here, and maybe I might have just seen, maybe two more. I might have one more come in case I want to network with people at the company I applied for and ask for referrals, should I rather network with higher ranked people or with those who've already had the position that I'm looking for, or who already have the position, maybe are in it or were in it?
Oh, yeah, good question. I definitely wouldn't ping people that are higher. I feel like those folks are getting pinged like so much every day. So I would definitely ping people that are, you know, in the job or even like mid-level managers, maybe directors. So like directors, managers, senior managers, we're always like hiring and trying to fill roles. And, you know, we're always at this point in the career where we're like, okay, yeah, happy to help people and try to do our best. So I would start there. And then, yeah, I mean, the more the merrier. So I'd reach out to a few folks if you're able to. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, we have a great one to kind of finish up with here. Myra asks, what is something that has surprised you since you started working at Apple?
Well played. Well played. So yeah, what surprised me working at Apple? So Apple has been around for a long time. They're a staple within Silicon Valley. And my first assumption coming into Apple was that, oh, they have it together. Like Apple is all together, has it, you know, set up end to end. When I get here, I'm like, holy cow, we don't. And so, like, honestly, I think that catches a lot of people off guard. And so, you know, here at Apple, it's fascinating to me because, you know, I've been outside of Apple, I know what's going on out there, and I can do it here at Apple. But, you know, not having everything set up, not having it get put together as Apple, it was super surprising. But that being said, it's still super fun. So super happy to be at Apple.
Okay, I think that is, I do see one more coming in here.
Okay.
We just have a couple minutes left, so I'll make sure we'll do one more question. So for business development and marketing outreach, what are the benefits of Sales Navigator at LinkedIn?
Ooh. Yes, good question. Good question. So I'll be honest, my knowledge of Sales Navigator is limited in the sense that I've been focusing more on the free product and not the paid tier. I think also it's public knowledge that Sales Navigator revenue was probably not as high as, let's say, like the recruiter revenue. So it's not a large portion of the market. But from LinkedIn's perspective, the key of leveraging Sales Navigator is really twofold. So first, obviously, being able to monitor and understand your pipeline. But then secondly, it's really about warm sales, right? So you can get introductions through like second or third network. Excuse me. So it's not necessarily a cold intro or a cold call. And so I think those are really the big benefits of Sales Navigator. Now, I haven't really been plugged in too much, but those are kind of the two things that come to mind with respect to Sales Navigator.
Awesome. Okay, I think that is it. This is perfect timing. Thank you all for your questions and for being here. And thank you again, Warren. This was really awesome. And I've definitely gleaned a lot from this. So super thankful that you were able to spend your time with us today. Just a couple notes for everybody, just so that we're, just so that you guys kind of know what can be a next step. We do have a Point Loma alumni job board. So the job board we have is on LinkedIn. And so it's really a spot for Point Loma alums specifically to kind of network with each other. And so we would really encourage you to join that if you have not already. You can just head to LinkedIn, search PLNU Alumni Job Board, and and then you can request to join. So we hope that you can engage with us in that way as well. We also have Loma Talks coming up. So this is our first of a series of Loma Talks that we have in the alumni office to continue to engage in these conversations and ask really good questions about a lot of different topics. So I would invite you to check those out as well. Coming up, so we have a lot of topics coming up. Our next week we have a topic on mental health. We're also going into aligning finances with your values. We have some fun ones with floral arranging and connection with Nazarene Compassionate Ministries. And then another one that we're excited about is a collaboration with Center for Justice and Reconciliation on campus, where we're going to engage in some conversations about race. And so we hope that you will join us for those. You can find them at pointloma.edu/alumni, just on our alumni page. And yeah, thank you for being here from all over. And yeah, we really hope that you got a lot out of this. And again, Warren's email is in the chat box. We will be sharing the presentation with you, as well as that Google form, or I'm sorry, the Google site that Warren recommends taking a look at. So yeah, that's it from us. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and good luck with the job and LinkedIn search. And do great.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. All right.
Cool. All right. I'm going to sign off. Thanks,
Bye,
Chelsea.
everyone.